The dirt road twisted and turned through the dense forest, each bend narrowing until the trees seemed to close in around us. I gripped the steering wheel, watching my friends in the rearview mirror. The late afternoon light barely filtered through the trees as we drove deeper into Pine Hollow woods, and I couldn't shake an uneasy feeling, like we were venturing somewhere we didn't belong. Pete leaned forward from the back seat, breaking the silence. "Are we sure this is the right way? Feels like we've been driving forever." "Relax," I said, though I was starting to feel a chill myself. "We're close, and that's the point. Isolated, just us and nature. A couple of nights in the wild." "Just us and nature," Pete muttered, glancing out the window, "until nature decides it's hungry." Beside me, James rolled his eyes. "You worry too much, Pete. It's a couple of days with friends in the woods. What's the worst that could happen?" The road finally opened up into a small clearing next to a narrow creek, and I parked the car. As we stepped out, the forest was silent, eerily so. No birds, no insects, just a heavy, still quiet that seemed to press down on us. We shrugged it off, setting up camp as the sky darkened. We were all a little tense, casting glances into the woods. I told myself it was the quiet, or maybe the slight chill in the air, but it was more than that. I could feel it like a weight pressing on my chest. By the time night had fallen, the fire cast long shadows against the trees, making the darkness beyond feel even darker. We settled in around the fire, beers in hand, the tension easing just a bit. Mark, always the first to break the silence, grinned. "Since we're out here in these creepy woods, who's up for a scary story?" he asked, a smirk on his face. Pete shuddered. "Come on, man. Don't you think this place is creepy enough?" I laughed, but the sound felt forced. "Scared already, Pete? We haven't even been out here a full night." "Pine Hollow's got a legend anyway, right?" Mark continued. "The hollow-eyed stalker? That's what they call it. Apparently there's some spirit or creature out here that hunts anything that enters its territory." James scoffed. "Oh, here we go?" "No, I'm serious," Mark said, lowering his voice for effect. Supposedly, years ago, a hunter named Elias Vale went missing in these woods. They say he was cursed and transformed into something else, a creature with hollow eyes that wanders the woods at night, looking for anyone unlucky enough to cross its path. "And if it calls your name," Mark paused, looking at each of us, "you're already as good as dead." The fire crackled as Mark's words settled over us. The wind shifted, making the flames flicker, and a sudden eerie chill swept over our campsite. "That's creepy, man," I muttered, glancing over my shoulder into the dark trees. "Guess I'll be hearing Louis on the wind tonight." "Yeah, well, it's just a story," Mark said with a shrug, though he looked a little pale. Right. As we crawled into our tents, I found myself wide awake, staring at the thin fabric above me. Outside, the silence was so complete, it almost felt heavy. I lay still, straining to hear anything, the rustle of leaves, a snap of a twig. But there was nothing. Then, sometime past midnight, I heard footsteps, slow, deliberate, circling our camp. My breath caught, and I lay perfectly still, heart hammering as the steps grew louder. I tried to convince myself it was an animal, but the pattern was wrong, too steady and too slow. And then, a voice, a soft whisper, drifting through the stillness. I stopped breathing. It was my name, spoken in a voice I didn't recognize, deep and hollow, like it was clawing its way up from under the earth. The voice came again, closer this time, almost amused. My mind raced back to Mark's story, the legend of the hollow-eyed stalker. "Don't answer," I told myself. "Don't look." But my hands shook, every instinct screaming at me to run. Suddenly, James's face appeared at the entrance of my tent, his eyes wide. Did Did you hear that? I nodded, barely able to speak. Yeah. What the hell was that? Pete and Mark were awake too, huddled together by the fire. We gathered in a tight circle, clutching flashlights and trying to calm each other down. It's probably just one of us messing around, James muttered, though he didn't sound convinced. Yeah, who? Mark shot back, his voice shaking. It was all of us here, right? A branch snapped in the darkness, closer than before, and we all turned. A pair of eyes glistened at the edge of the firelight, hollow and empty, like black pits. Run, I whispered, my voice barely a breath. We broke into a sprint, leaving the firelight behind as we plunged into the dark forest. The creature's footsteps followed, heavy and slow, but somehow it stayed close, no matter how fast we ran. I glanced back, seeing the outline of something tall and twisted moving through the shadows, its hollow eyes fixed on us. Then it called out again. Pete. It was my voice, my own voice, calling for Pete from somewhere deep in the trees. Pete froze, his face pale with confusion, but I grabbed his arm, pulling him forward. Don't listen, I hissed. Just keep going. The creature's steps grew louder, faster, and the voice called again, shifting. This time it was Mark's voice, pleading, desperate. Lewis, wait. Help me. I shook my head, forcing myself to keep moving, but Mark stopped, staring back into the trees. That's me, he stammered, his voice breaking. Before I could stop him, he turned, stepping back toward the voice. Mark, no, I yelled, but it was too late. I ran, my breaths ragged, the taste of fear bitter in my mouth. The footsteps followed, slower now, as if savoring the hunt. I stumbled over a root, falling hard onto the forest floor, and for a moment I just lay there, listening to the creature approach. Its hollow eyes appeared in the darkness, closer than ever, staring down at me with an empty, hungry gaze. I scrambled backward, heart racing, and finally forced myself to my feet, bolting through the trees until I could see the first faint light of dawn breaking through the branches. When I finally stumbled out of the woods, barely able to stand, I was alone. My friends were gone, taken by whatever haunted those woods, left behind in the darkness with hollow eyes watching over them. By the time the park ranger found me, I was barely able to speak, my mind fractured by what I'd seen. He tried to reassure me, told me it was just the forest playing tricks on me. But even as we drove away, I could still hear the whispers, still feel those hollow eyes watching from the shadows, promising that one day they would find me again. If you liked today's original story, make sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel. Until the next time, for more tales of terror.